Brunswick College of Craft and Design has a yearly graduation, as most colleges do. This year, 1994, was a pretty sensational graduation. Sensational? Why? Well, it was the largest number of graduates, 21. That's a big jump from 16 last year. By general acclamation, the exhibition is one of the most sensational there has ever been. And I have to agree, the quality of the work is wonderful. And a lot of it goes unrealized. How do these students get to this level? Well, it's 3 years of enormously intensive work. In fact, they called their show, "Was That Due Today?" And each student has got one of these little boards by their work, and they've written an excuse, the type of excuse, why didn't you get your work in? Deadlines are terribly important. You don't get in on a deadline, you lose a job. So one of the things stressed at the College of Craft and Design is meeting deadlines. Very, very important. The work is of all the studios, and so let's wander around and I'll talk while we look at them. Fabric Studio, very, very strong this year. This gentleman, commonly known as Woody, David Purley, a native student, doing incredibly well. Beautiful, beautiful work. On the wall are what are called croquis, which are the working out the type of images that are then going to be translated into a screen and printed on fabric. The croquis are experimental. You try out different color combinations. There's one over there in very bright colors, there's one in very muted colors, and the actual fabric itself comes from this design over here, the more muted one. It's, again, beautiful, beautiful work. Now let's go on here. This is an interesting one. This is a fellow called Paul Agassi, and he's the one graphics student graduating this year. Now Paul is a fellow who's extremely interested in science fiction, and he writes as well, as you can see, but he's done a sort of strip cartoon, a very sophisticated one, the type that you'd find in a heavy metal magazine, that type of thing. He's used techniques, which a variety of techniques, but he's been particularly experimenting in airbrush techniques. Now, this is one of the things that always makes these exhibitions of the craft school students so interesting. You've got 8 studios, 7 studios, and when you walk around, there isn't any sense of house style. The only common denominator is quality and imagination. No student is like any other student. Each student follows their own star and develops the skills and the interests that are theirs. The school never imposes. It grows from what the student already has. It's very, very noticeable in Paul Agassi's work, because he's got this huge interest in science fiction, type and fantasy, and also in this technique of airbrushing. Now, another person who's a real individual is Alan Saunders. Now, Alan's a metal man, and these metal students this year, several of them, have not only produced the objects such as this extraordinary dagger chalice, but they've produced the stands on which their work will go. So how the work is displayed is part of the total work of the student. And as you can see, there's a terrific variety of work, from very pagan, very strong Celtic influenced work, such as this mask up here and this chalice here, to very, very delicate casting down here where he's experimented in silver and using dragonflies, the actual dragonflies, and exploring casting from the dead creature and then turning it into silver. From this, we go to colour with a student, Anne-Marie, who is a weaver, obviously. She's a textile student, but a lady who loves colour. This is at the end of the gallery, and it's a real eye-stopper. And again, every year there are different techniques, different ideas. And this year you'll see two examples, two weaving students, where they've used a technique which is called dyed warp. Warp is the threads that go this way, weft are the threads that go that way. And you can see these color variations here, combined with a very formal treadling and pattern technique in the middle. This is what makes these things so exciting. And not only this, she's combined all sorts of things. She's included metals, little copper discs, which make a very nice sound in her hanging. And subtly into here, very difficult to see, but she's woven a very, very subtle pattern running through here. And at the top and bottom, she's got the dyed warp. Fabric students explore all sorts of things. Anne-Marie's experiments have been in colour, and this is a rug that she worked on for months and months and months. I remember seeing her do it, where she was exploring the potential of pure colour. One of the interesting things about these students is people say, oh, they go to that college, what do they do? I mean, where do they end up? I mean, how can they make a living? There was a very surprising statistic at graduation. The director of the college said that something like 80% of the graduates are working in the arts or in allied careers. They range from all sorts of things. I mean, they're working in design studios, they're potters in their own right, they've got their own studios and they're working as potters and producing and selling. Jewelers, they're working for jewelers, they're working independently. Fashion designers, making stuff, selling it. But there's all the other careers like museum work. Several of the graduates are working in museums. Photographers, very strong this year, difficult to see on the camera. This is another native student who has done some very exciting experiments in these pictures with solarization, which is a technique largely done in the darkroom. He took a model into a derelict building and created these very stunning images. Difficult to see because they're so dark, but they are beautiful images. Honors. Honors is something which doesn't come easily, and usually there can be no honor students or there can be one or two. This year there were 6. Now, how do kids get honors? Well, they get honors because all through their 3 years, they're evaluated by their studio heads and the various members of staff. Every 7 weeks, they are evaluated. They have to put their work on show. They have to explain their work, justify the 7 weeks' work. And the 12th time is for graduation. This is what this is. This is the super show. And they are evaluated not by internal people. They've been marked, but they're evaluated by professionals working in the field that they work in. For instance, if somebody was working particularly, say, in rug weaving and rug techniques, or tapestry, one of the textile students, a tapestry artist or a rug artist would be their evaluator. Now, the evaluators, apart from helping these students to launch into their career, break the umbilical cord from the school, they are empowered to recommend for honours. So it is the professionals who decide whether a student should get honours. Now, it's nothing to do with marks, it's to do with calibre of work, it's to do with what potential they've shown, whether they've gone beyond what they've been requested to do as a student. Now, this lady here, a fashion student, Lisa Treitz, was an honours student. It's not surprising when you see her work. It's very original, it's enormously creative, it's technically extremely good, it's very, very imaginative. She's taken the idea of a period flavour, a sort of romantic period. So she's got a suit here, and she's even carried it through to the hats, a suit for a woman which is based on the romantic period of the transition from the 18th to the 19th century. It's delightful, it's charming. And Lisa was one of the students who was given honours. Now, in some cases here, there's some beautiful, beautiful chalices. And these are examples of raised work. Now, raising is a technique where from the flat metal you produce a solid object. And you have to understand that these chalices were once a flat sheet of metal. Very complex, very, very beautiful, highly considered. The work again of a native student. His name is Calvin Smith, and there is one very fascinating object round here, a hand holding a clock surrounded by symbols from native culture. The potters did extremely well this year, and one of them, Rachel Toole, her work is here. She's concentrated on objects of use. All the potters, all three of them, received honours, and when you look at their work, it's not surprising. Rachel, one of the characteristics this year of the potters has been decoration and colour, and you'll see, particularly in the other two who also received honours, the sort of exploration they've been doing into decoration. Students tend to fire each other off, and if one gets excited with something, they all get excited with it. And these three, decoration has been the excitement. For the last few years actually, the show has been at Memorial Hall at UMB. It's a nice place to have the show. They're warm, comfortable galleries. Staff are very supportive. And the whole idea is that the work should be shown outside the college, that it should be launched into the public. Now, this young lady, for instance, is an interesting lady, Regina Fahrenbach. She was a lady that came over, a young lady from Germany, and she became a fashion designer, and as you can see, like Lisa that we saw in the other gallery, she's a very original designer. Her work is not like anybody else's, and she's also developed a considerable skill with her fashion drawing and her presentation, because you've got to remember that drawing is enormously important to students, because you can't make up a garment like this and ship it. It's far better to do it on paper and send that initially. And again, we've found, for instance, that in many contests that these students enter, it's this that they're juried on, not the finished product. The finished product comes once they've got through the preliminaries with their designs. Regina's experimented with all sorts of things, different techniques, using fabric paints and producing men's ties, stunners. In the middle, another weaver, Isabel. Another lady who is a Canadian now, but wasn't born here. She came from China, and she has been exploring the most wonderful techniques. Again, I said that students trigger each other off. She too, like Anne-Marie, has been experimenting with dyed warp. These techniques, for instance, are very traditional in the East. Beautiful techniques, the technique of ikat, which is using dyes and weaving painted warps and wefts together to produce new patterns. And as you can see, Isabel's work, she's experimented with all sorts of techniques. This, for instance, is a dyed warp, absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful, rich color. This is another honors student, not surprisingly. Another very talented gentleman is Jonathan Best. Again, forging and raising. Beautiful, beautiful vessels that he's created, and a sculptural how to destroy a work of art, one easy lesson. A sculptural display created from industrial waste. Bits of old metal that had been chucked out, old cogwheels. Fascinating, but beautiful, beautiful work, ranging from a very delicate crown he made for a special exhibition, a crown for the goddess, and delicate little jugs with patinated metal and silver, to chalices and jugs, and knives. Another very fascinating student is Gordon Williams. Gordon is a guy who's really, I mean, he's working now. He's got his own set-up studio. He's in business. These guys don't let the grass grow under their feet. He is a very good formal photographer, but for his grad show, he did these interesting collages of photos, taking a theme and then multiplying the images and applying them on top of the initial image. Fascinating work. Another young man very determined to succeed, another metal worker, is Thomas Hobson. And Tom has been exploring techniques using what is called metal forming, twisting and turning metals into these exotic shapes. It's a very good technique. It's the sort of thing that you call your bread and butter line. because you can be experimental and you can produce lovely, luxurious work, but you've also got to have something that will bring the bread onto the table. And so you have to develop original and fresh and new things which are very easy and quick to produce, which will bring in the bread and butter. And Tom's got a very good line in these. But it doesn't mean he's neglected the more advanced work, such as forging and raising, casting, and making vessels, such as there. Another young lady on her way to possible very great success is Leah Phillips. Leah submitted her work to the Certex Foundation in New York, and she is the only Canadian being selected to display her work at this international show, usually dominated by the Americans, the Japanese, and the Germans, with quite a strong contingent from Britain. So we've got somebody there, Leah Phillips. This is a terrific honor for her, but she deserves it. Her work is extremely good. Here, as we saw with the other students' work, are croquis, explorations, variations, and a skirt made up of this design. The computer, of course, the color computer has become an enormous help, particularly to fashion designers and fabric designers, because instead of laboriously having to paint all your croquis, you can explore the color variations on with a mini video camera and on a computer. One wishes that there were more computers available to these young designers, because it is in the young designers from which our industry in New Brunswick will grow. It is these people who make what we produce in New Brunswick unique and desirable, as we can see with this young lady having the success in New York. Another very, very successful lady is Mary Ellen Nealis. Mary Ellen already has a business. Now she's interesting because she's been a part-time student for many years, and she's graduated. She's worked extremely hard, keeping her business going at the same time, and also having a family. She's a mum, and she produced for her grad show. And remember, this is only a small sampling of the work that they've produced. They show much, much more to their examiners. She produced a series of portraits trying to reflect in the lighting, the color, the unusual applications, and the way she's interpreted the models, trying to make a new statement about them. This is the young lady. You saw her work there in the other gallery. There's her work. There is she, painted like her work. And last but not least, two potters. And I said they were all honors students. This lady, Kim Stillwell, decoration again, very important. Doesn't mean the pots aren't nice. The dishes are lovely, but it's decoration that's fired these potters off this year. And in this corner, another lady, Nancy Stobie, who in fact was the valedictorian. Nancy has been producing these beautiful, beautiful pots, tiles, dishes, and taken her inspiration from other times, other periods. These have an antique quality to them, which you can see very clearly, but they're Nancy. They're not fake copies. These are Nancy Stobie's original, very original and creative works, but reflecting the ideas of past times. Beautiful, beautiful work. No wonder she was valedictorian. So, they're launched, 21 new New Brunswick artists. They'll be successful. They're determined. They wouldn't have got this far unless they were determined.
The New Brunswick Community Television Archive, exploring New Brunswick's history of community television programming, is an educational initiative of CHCO-TV.